Xin Chao, and welcome to the Odd Game. I'm your host, Ryan Walters, coming to you from the relatively quiet streets of Hanoi, where I'm based for a few weeks, taking in some V-League action and spending time with the actual AFF Mitsubishi Electric Cup, the actual trophy. It's at a mall soon. We'll see you here. However, we're not here talking about any of that today. No, instead, I am joined by my original co-host, not Quiche, my original co-host, one of the men still proudly flying the flag of K-League United back in Korea. You can hear him as one of the voices of K-League on the international feed every weekend, and you can see him as the sports anchor on Arirang News every Monday. It's the one and only Paul Neat. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you. That was quite the intro. Thank you very much.
Well, you know, you got to big up people when you get them ready to get. And actually, it's not even big. It's just saying what you do.
Well, I suppose, yeah. I've got a shave because it's Monday, so it is Monday.
So if you're listening to the podcast, you got to tune into the video version because a clean-shaven gentleman is kind of a rarity on here because I've always got the hosting duties, and then Quiche usually has a little bit of facial hair going on there. But yeah, we aren't actually talking about just Malaysian football this time, nor Vietnamese football or Korean football. We're going to talk about all of them, but like this is the crossover pod that's been, I think, 2 years in the making for me at this point.
At least.
I assume everybody that's listening knows that I used to do K-League United. If not, K-League United, go check them out. It's what a website. What a great
up-and-coming website.
An up-and-coming website, yeah. Which we are talking today, not just reminiscing. We'll do that next year when we're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of K-League United. Just a little tidbit there for folks. We'll see you in Korea next year for that one. FIFA tournaments, games, a little bit of barbecue. It's going to be great. But we are actually here to talk about football, not just reminiscing about the good old times when we used to do this in person. No, we are here talking about K-League teams because we've got a lot of ASEAN sides facing off against K-League teams in AFC Champions League Elite and then one in AFC Champions League 2. Still getting used to those names, but it's...
Fans over here, Ryan, sorry, they call it the Europa League. As in the Asian Europa League because it's the second one. Doesn't make sense, but it's just, you know, it's the second tier competition, so that's what they call it here.
Europa. I don't hate it. I mean, it's not too. I don't know. It just feels like a movie sequel this way more than it feels like a secondary competition. Like AFC Cup was great, as everybody knows. It was an amazing competition, but like saying ACL 2, it's like it's back for vengeance. That kind of thing.
Yeah. It's a sequel. Yeah, exactly. John Book are back for vengeance. That's what it is.
Are they, though? We're going to talk about them soon. And you called a game over the weekend, which, again, Paul is one of the voices doing commentary and also sneaking in a little bit because you are a Daejeon Hana Citizen fan, supporter. That's how you got into all this. And you called their game against Jeonbuk over the weekend with Matthew Binns, who's a Jeonbuk supporter. And it ended 2-0 for the folks that weren't watching. And that second goal went in. And I thoroughly enjoyed it because I could hear your actual joy in calling the goal. And Matt was just silent. There was just a minute of silence.
Yeah, it was a relief, really, because there was the penalty that Daejeon missed to make it 2-0 much earlier in the game. And it took a while for the referee to go back and have a look at VAR because there was a handball, a shot by Massa got touched around the post by Park Jin-sop, the Jeonbuk centre-back, and play carried on for about a minute, and then he checked the VAR, and then I was just kind of shaking. I could feel myself sort of being very jittery. I don't know what it was, and then after the penalty was missed, it was all just the drama of it. I don't know. It wasn't necessarily the penalty itself, but I don't know. So when that second goal went in added time, it was just relief, really. I did feel a little bit for Matthew because obviously he's having to sit there and watch his team lose at home, lose back-to-back games in the league against relegation rivals. So I did feel for him, but I was just relieved. Hopefully I didn't sound too biased in my commentary. I do try hard to, stay as neutral as possible. But yeah, just sheer relief and just it was a good game, I thought.
Yeah, it was a really fun game. And I mean, also, oh, poor Matthew, who's seen his team win the league 17 million times and AFC Champions League. Could you imagine your team being relegated, Paul? Could you imagine the horrors of dealing with that? I mean, oh, geez, how
Yeah,
terrible for him.
yeah.
But we'll transition here and we'll talk about a team that was relegated not too long ago in K League. We'll talk about Gwangju FC. They're going to be facing JDT in. They're also going to be facing off in Yongin. So for folks outside of Korea, I think we need to start with what I feel is the obvious question, but folks might not know because if you're not following Korean football, you might not know how far Yongin is from Gwangju. So like, let's start there. Where is this match happening and why?
Okay, so yeah, Yongin Mida Stadium, which Mida means dragon, apparently. It is some 272 kilometers, or roughly 170 miles north of Gwangju in Gyeonggi Province. Some fans had kind of speculated that the AFC had looked at the wrong Gwangju because there is a city of Gwangju in and around Yongin, the city of Yongin. So when it was announced, I was like, are they looking at the right part of the map? But yeah, it's right now. It's where Suwon Blue Wings have been playing their home games due to some maintenance work at Suwon World Cup Stadium, and it's also where the Korean national team beat Iraq just last week. So it's a stadium that doesn't normally get used, but all of a sudden we've got World Cup qualifiers, we've got K League 2, and now we've got ACL E. So suddenly it's the most popular stadium in the country. It's not a bad stadium. I haven't actually been there myself, but it looks, from what I've seen, there is a running track, but I think if you sit in the corners, it's not too far of a view. It does look, it is quite a newish stadium, so it is quite a nice looking ground. But the reason why they're playing here is due to complaints about the state of the playing surface at Gwangju World Cup Stadium, which is no longer their actual home stadium. They built a Lego looking stadium next door, but come on, I'm it's Lego Stadium, and it's not up to scratch in terms of AFC's sort of regulations and stuff. So they had to move it to Gwangju World Cup Stadium. But the pitch was so bad, they had complaints from Yokohama F. Marinos, and also Ulsan had complaints about their pitch at the Munsu from Kawasaki Frontale. So they had to, AFC then basically forced them to move to somewhere with a better playing surface. Now, stadiums in and around the province where Gwangju is located, there weren't any that were ready or teams weren't willing to let them use it. So they had to go very, very far north, and they are playing basically an away game, but at home. So that's how it is. They are going to go back to Gwangju World Cup Stadium eventually. The mayor of Gwangju did issue an apology about this whole fiasco, and they do intend to go back there after this JDT game is out of the way and they play their next home game. But for now, bit embarrassing, and hopefully the pitch quality does improve at some point.
I mean, this is something that we were talking about this throughout all of my time at K League United. Like the pitches, it's a consistent thing in Korea, and this is a really bizarre one as well because, like you say, Gwangju, for folks who don't know, is down south in Korea. It's a little bit closer to Busan. It's certainly closer. Like Jeonnam has a stadium that could work for this. Like there are just so many other options, but it's like, nope, let's get everybody on a train and go all the way up north, close to Seoul, and have the match up there for like you say, it's going to be essentially an away game, but it'll be an interesting one for Gwangju. And for folks that don't know about Gwangju, I think they might be seeing a Korean team in this competition and thinking like, oh, this is a powerhouse, but like this is their first time in international football, and they came out and smacked Yokohama in that opener. But is this something? Can they keep this going? How are they looking in the league right now? So the league splits for folks that don't know, and right now it's still final A and final B, right? Or are we calling it promotion and relegation? It's final A and final B. They haven't changed that yet. Okay,
not yet, but I'm sure they will at some point.
Well, Final A are the folks competing for the championship, and Final B are the folks trying to avoid relegation. It is. I still do like the system, but Guangzhou find themselves in Final B. Are they relegation threatened? How are they looking?
They are safe, more or less, from automatic relegation. So they, at the moment, they have enough points really to. They have a 12-point lead over last place, and they've got a considerably better goals scored record, which obviously is the first tiebreaker in K League compared to Incheon, who sit bottom. So they are essentially 13 points clear. So they're safe from automatic, but they're only 6 points ahead of the relegation playoff places. So they're still not safe. Although, a draw at the weekend against Daegu, not the end of the world, but it was only their second draw of the season. They've played 34 games and they've drawn just twice because they're so unpredictable. They win or they lose. There's never really anything in between. 1 week they can slice through a team like FC Seoul, like they did in round 33, or they can labour to a 1-1 draw like they did against Daegu. I think in terms of how they're looking at this season, having to balance ACL E with K League is been difficult for them because their squad isn't that big and they've got a lot of injuries as well. And I looked at their lineup with extra interest against Daegu because I wanted to see how much rotation the manager did, because obviously, like you said, they have had this great start in ACLE, much better than anybody would have expected. So I was looking to see, is he going to rotate things? And maybe if they hadn't have started, it might sound a bit strange to say this, but if they hadn't have started so well, he maybe would have rotated things a bit more in the league. But because they have got this foundation now to really potentially reach the knockouts, obviously it's still only 2 games in, but with 2 wins from 2, they are in they are better placed than anybody else, which is incredible, really, because of how small of a team they are compared to some of these teams in this competition, even the ones that they've already beaten. So there was a bit of rotation at the weekend against Daegu, but they've obviously lost Gabriel Tigrao and Jao Magno through injury. Asani didn't play because his flight back via Istanbul from international break was delayed. The manager said that he was originally supposed to play against Daegu, but because he only arrived back the day before, basically he wasn't allowed to. So I think what we'll see is, because this is not a home game, but it's a game in Korea, Asani will probably start and he'll be looking to sort of get some minutes and make sure that he's fit and ready for the rest of Final B, because like I say, they aren't safe. So they're doing better than most. They are level on points with JG United in Final B, 44 points. But JG won at the weekend, and obviously they're also quite unpredictable. They've only drawn 2 as well. So it's a very interesting sort of record that these 2 teams have had. Guangzhou, they have this knack of getting a result whenever they seem to need it. They go on little spells where they've lost a few games, but they will somehow be able to sort of just dig in. So they're doing okay, but up next they've obviously got some big games coming up next, and they've got Incheon away at the weekend, which is obviously huge, because if they win that, obviously then you can probably say they are not safe, but 9 points clear of the relegation zone potentially. So let's see.
Well, doing themselves a favor, pushing Incheon a little bit further down, but I'm not giving up on Incheon having the greatest of escapes yet again. Never give up on Incheon, ever. They'll find their way through. But I think this is an interesting one for Guangzhou coming into this, because I think there's potential that they might look past JDT a little bit. I think they might think that, oh, this is the team from Malaysia, because Guangzhou doesn't. I mean, obviously there's scouting, and of course, but I think they might not be looking at it in the same way that they were looking at Yokohama coming over from Japan, for example. And I think that it could be very dangerous for them in this one, because while Guangzhou are trying to fight off relegation and stay safe in the league, JDT are doing what JDT do, and they're top of the table, surprise, surprise, as they always are. And they're leading the league in scoring, surprise, surprise, by nearly 20 goals, by the way. Like, they are just as usual, blowing everybody else out of the water. Bergson's leading the league in scoring. He has 14 goals and 9 appearances as of time of recording. Like, it's as it always is in Malaysia, where JDT are just at a different tier. And I think this competition, they're really taking this one seriously this year. And I think this is one where they've got a really great opportunity here, because like you were saying, this isn't really a home game for Gwangju. It's not neutral, JDT has to fly over to Korea, but Gwangju also have to travel for this one. And they went and they got a 3-0 win against Shanghai Shenhua last time out at home. And I personally think that they should be disappointed. JDT should be disappointed with that first game against Shanghai Port, where they had the lead twice. And if you want to advance in these competitions and you want to be one of the teams that's in the knockout rounds here, you've got to win those games. So I think they'll be coming in full of confidence, because JDT always have confidence. Why wouldn't they? And I think that this could be not a trap necessarily for Gwangju, but like, I think this is going to be a really close game. And I personally kind of favor JDT in this one, especially with the form RF Iman is in. 3 goals in 2 games. And this kid's not going to be in Malaysia for a whole lot longer if he decides that he wants to go over to Europe or Japan. Or, I mean, look, I'd love to see him in K-League, but that doorway doesn't seem to be as welcoming as it is in Japan. But I think this one, Gwangju could find themselves in trouble, especially if JDT get an early goal in this one, which they're very capable of doing. But have I been gone for too long? Is this my I live in Southeast Asia now bias? Do you feel the same way about this one? How are you thinking Gwangju is going to do in this?
I think with the manager that they've got at Guangzhou, they will be definitely aware that they can't underestimate JDT, which now I know what the DT stands for, different tier, as you just said. So there you go, a whole different tier.
Uh-huh. It's actually,
but the thing is about JDT is we everybody knows how strong they are at home, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But this is the chance for them to show that they're not just a home team, that they can upset some of the so-called not bigger teams, but teams from bigger leagues on the road. So yeah, that JDT will, I'm sure, be coming here with no fear whatsoever. Gwangju will. I think the manager is so demanding of his players that he will not allow any drop in performances or effort levels. There is a danger of that, but I think, strangely, the result at the weekend in K-League might kind of shape how he wants his team to react, because he sort of lamented the team's defensive concentration, and I think they're going to have to. His players are going to have to react now. They're going to have to, and they're going to have to try and use this JDT game as a way to get this sort of season back on track for them, because, like I say, they're not safe. So I think they will probably be. I'm not saying they would have underestimated them if they'd have beaten Daegu at the weekend, but it's probably just a little time to sort of have a little rethink, regroup, and refocus, and then really make sure that they are at their best against JDT.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And that one, I'm very curious to see how that one plays out. That one's happening tomorrow, by the way. We are recording on the 21st. That one's happening on the 22nd. And moving on from one domestic champion that's dominating the league to another domestic champion that's dominating the league. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Buriram United are doing well in Thailand. Shocking. I know. Shocking. It is a tighter race than it is for JDT in Malaysia, but Buriram have played a few fewer matches than the other teams in Thai League. Basoli and Superchai are leading the Golden Boot race, as you might expect there. Filipino number 1, Neil Etheridge, is between the sticks there. For folks that don't know, came back from Europe after a long stint with Birmingham City. And again, surprise, surprise, he leads the league in clean sheets. Like they're just doing what Buriram do, as is typical for them. And speaking of clean sheets, they did get a clean sheet and a 0-0 draw with Vissel Kobe on match day 1. And to me, they also had a really big statement in the way that JDT had a statement last time out at home. I think Buriram had a really strong statement when they went and they beat Central Coast Mariners 2-1 in Gosford. And I know a lot of people will say the Mariners are lower tier in this competition. Whatever. Going from Buriram down to Australia and getting a result, that says a lot, I think. And I think that's a statement of intent from Buriram. And now they're going to be playing back at home, where they always do really well, where we'll see a lot of fans in the stands for this one. They always draw really well because there's nothing else to do in Buriram. But I think that this is another one where I think the Southeast Asian side is going to be coming in with a lot of confidence because, again, they're Buriram. They've always got a lot of confidence. And this is going to be, I think this is going to be a little bit of a tricky one for Pohang but maybe not, because unlike Gwangju has things to worry about at home. Pohang really don't, right? Like they're safe. They're not really in title contention. They are in Final A. So I guess the question there is, are Pohang strictly focused on ACL now because they've done really well in this tournament in recent years and they are a good tournament team? We saw them win the FA Cup recently as well. So is this their focus now?
I don't know, because I think in one or two of their last games, maybe it was their first ACL game, they rotated things quite a lot, and it suggested that at that point ACLE wasn't a priority. But it's hard because they're fighting on three fronts. They are in the Korea Cup final against Ulsan at the end of November, and they had been league leaders up until round 29, and no team has accumulatively, anyway, led K-League 1 more than Pohang this season, 11 weeks in total. So they have tailed off. But if you look at their XG, they have performed well above what's being expected of them. 52 goals from an XG of 43.59. So it was bound to end up like this at some point and sort of even itself out. But I think they'll feel like they need to make amends in the league, and so they can't really focus too much on the ACL. They're obviously going to have to take it seriously. They're going to have to, because they're Pohang Steelers. There's a certain level of expectation when they do compete in ACL, and obviously they reached the final not that long ago.
Yeah.
And they tried to rotate against Shanghai Shenhua, and it backfired. They got beat quite badly, really. So they're going to have to, I think, probably now accept that the title has gone, and that might be good for them in the ACL, because back when they obviously first played the first couple of games in this year's competition of ACLE, they still had that realistic chance of winning the title. That's gone now, really.
Yeah.
And it might just sort of refocus things and think, well, listen, we've got the FA Cup. That's, the finals come. We don't have to worry about that yet. We can obviously try and get back into the race for finishing second or third. But really, with Gimcheon, Sangmu, the army team in K-League, with them being second, or I think it's third now, they can't qualify for ACL. So it means that the qualification will drop down a place for ACLE and ACL2. So it won't take a lot for Pohang to qualify again. So they can really, in theory, look at the ACLE this year and then try and go as far as they can in it, and even go on and perhaps try and reach the semis or the final. Yeah,
like you say, this is a team that always, in recent years anyway, I mean, back when they were winning this competition, it wasn't a surprise, but I think when they made the final against Al Hilal, it was quite surprising that it was them and not Ulsan. But Ulsan went and Ulsaned that year, as they were doing at the time. This was before they were winning every title. Back when I was around, and I was the curse that just kept Jeonbuk winning every year. I leave Korea, and all of a sudden, Jeonbuk's relegation threatened. It's fine. I'm not bitter about it. It's fine. But keeping the focus off of me for a little bit and on Pohang, my Posco brothers, as they are known from time to time.
Yeah,
you alluded to this. They got thrashed when they rotated heavily. They lost 4-0 against Shanghai Shenhua in China, but then they rebounded really well. And maybe Shanghai Port's just not that great this year. Who knows? But they've not been doing well. But Pohang got a 3-0 win at home against Port. So my question here is, which team are we going to see in Thailand? Are you expecting them to rotate heavily? Like, is this kind of the strategy, to rotate heavily and send the kids out on the road, or who are we going to see showing up in Buriram?
I think, again, a similar situation with Gwangju, because they drew in the last game of the weekend. They drew at home to Suwon FC, who are the team that are probably going to finish bottom of Final A and be the team that most teams pick up points against. I think because they drew that game and they were ahead, and then they let that lead slip the same way they did in round 33, the exact same fixture in round 33. So because they've done that, because they've allowed a team back into a game and they haven't been able to see things out, they're going to need to respond. They're going to need to get that sort of confidence building and momentum rediscovering win that they probably wanted in the last two games after the Shanghai Port win. Obviously, they haven't won since then. So I don't think he'll rotate too much. I think he probably will have to because they've got Ulsan coming up at the weekend. So it's at home, but it's the East Coast derby. So they can't afford to have, because they don't have a huge squad, Pohang, and they have had injuries, and they are quite limited in terms of who they've got up front personnel. Iho J's out for the season. Anje Jun, I think, as well, is highly likely to miss, if not all of the season, certainly most of what's left. Certainly in the league, he might come back for the sort of ACLE games later in the year. But they haven't got a big squad, so I'm not sure how much rotation they are going to be able to do. But they will need to respond. Again, concentration was something that Park Tae-ha, the manager, said after his game against Suwon. He wants his players to press a little bit better. I think they'll be more compact and a bit more aggressive in this game because obviously of who they're playing and where they're playing the game. It's a very tough place to go. It's going to be, I think, more of a tactical battle. Certainly in the first half. Second half, obviously, it depends on what happens in the first, but then they might see things open up a little bit. And they like to play with width. Wanderson is obviously having another great season. A lot of it goes through him. I think they will have they will want to. They'll be itching to get back on the field and put things right after two lackluster draws, really, in the last two games.
Yeah, like you say, that East Coast derby coming up, I think that's going to be a big one for them to keep an eye on, and you never want to play poorly in that one. A couple of quick ones here, and then we're going to move on to. We've alluded to Jeonbuk a couple of times, and it's so nice talking about them struggling. I'm neutral. It's fine. I don't support the team from the south of the same province. It's fine. But before we get on to that, there are a couple of that I think are interesting. This is in the Pohang section, sure, but I think this is interesting for folks here in Southeast Asia in general because Buriram are no stranger to former and future K-League players amongst our ranks. Osmar very famously wore the uniform for a bit. Kim Min-hyuk is there now, stabilizing the defense, winning titles as he does. Are there any Pohang players or any K-League players, like just opening up in general, are there any players in K-League that you think might make the switch to, and I think it's appropriate talking about it while we're talking about JDT and Buriram, two really big teams in the region that I think could lure some Korean players or some players in K-League. Is there anybody that you think might be making that switch anytime soon?
There are a couple, I think. Wanderson, I mentioned him just a minute ago, but he's 35. He's still doing very well, but he's no spring chicken anymore. And I think K-League clubs get a bit uneasy at foreign players over the age of 35, even if they are performing well, as we've seen in the past. And I think he's still doing very well. He's still a very, very important player. He's their captain. He plays at left back. Gets up and down that left-hand side very well. I think he's someone. I think he's still got a couple of, maybe certainly at least one more season in him in K-League. But I think he's the kind of player who would go over to Thailand or somewhere, another big club in Southeast Asia, and just have the chance to end his career, a good lifestyle, playing for a big club, chance of winning a trophy, a league title or a cup or something, or even going quite deep in the ACL. He's one. Kim In-sung is another, a winger, obviously at Pohang, was at Ulsan for a while. He's 35 as well. I think for players like them, because they are very clearly they are still capable, but they are 35. And I think it might be, if their contracts are running out, it might be a case of, well, what do I do? The club are going to offer me a 1-year deal. It's either I drop to K-League 2. I don't think they would either want to do that. The latter, he played for Seoul Elan for I think about 18 months, and obviously he left and then went to Pohang. So I think it's either K-League 2 or you sort of look a bit further afield and you go to somewhere like Thailand or Malaysia and you play for one of the sort of giants of those leagues, and you try and end your career, like I say, good lifestyle, and possibly end it with a league title.
I mean, I think Kim Min-hyuk's having a fine time. It seems like things are going quite well for him, as opposed to staying at Songnam, who should be relegated to K3, but that's a conversation for another time. Speaking of teams that I might have something against, I can be open about these things now that I don't live in Korea. It's fine.
There you go.
And this is another one just kind of on the note of the tournament in general. And I'm bringing it up with Buriram here because Buriram's 11 last time out consisted of just 2 Thai players because there's been a rule change in ACLE. Just Tiratan and Supachai. Those were the only Thai players in the starting 11 for Buriram last time out. So with this rule change, do you think, will we see any Korean teams do this? Because I bring it up especially against K-League teams because I think Pohang had 1 foreigner last time out. So they went the complete opposite route, as we've seen before. And Pohang very famously won the league with no foreigners 11 years ago. It was a while ago for them, but that seems to be more of the trend in Korea of sticking with Korean players. So do you think we'll see an influx of more foreign players at the ACL level for the Korean clubs?
I don't think so. I think obviously the players' union here is dead against having more foreigners. They are worried that players will lose their jobs, and you can understand where they're coming from. Obviously, there's more to gain, I think, in terms of you look at the Premier League 30 years ago when we started having sort of continental players coming over, and everything. Players and coaches, they learn a lot from all different aspects of like professionalism and diet and all this going and training methods. But they at the moment there's a 5+1 rule in K League, so teams can have 5 foreigners plus another from an Asian nation, but only 3+1 in the starting 11. That's a compromise because they are aware that the AFC Champions League has allowed teams to sort of field a lot more foreigners. So they are aware that they have to allow more because otherwise they're going to get left behind. But the compromise, in certainly domestically, is that it's only 3+1. I think it will stay like that unless K-League teams start to get really left behind. They haven't won an ACL.
Sure.
Well, I suppose they've won obviously Ulsan in 2020, and then before that it was John Book in 2016. But 2 in the last basically 8-9 years is not that great, really, if we're honest. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a case of if, say, Japan or Saudi teams start to dominate, and then they really start to pull away in terms of the number of ACL titles that their countries have won, then Korea might have to have a little rethink. But I don't think in the near future they're going to do that. I think there's also a little bit of a distrust in foreign players when things are starting to go a bit wrong. Form drops and managers are sort of shuffling the pack and trying to look for a safe 11 that's compact and hard to beat. They tend to leave the foreigners out or on the bench, and then they make come on. So the opposite, really. I think the sort of mentality and the cultural sort of way that teams here use foreigners might be a bit different culturally than how it is in Southeast Asia, where they're seen as the foreigners might guide the rest of the team through games or situations, whereas here it's a bit, as you know, it's a bit more like, well, no, we're going to do it our way, and you're going to do it our way with us. So I don't think there's that dynamic that's that I don't think it'll ever change here in that respect. But in terms of allowing more foreign players, I don't see it, unfortunately.
Well, if only there were a region here where some young, talented players were looking to get into bigger leagues. If only there were, like, I don't know, 10 or so nations in a certain region that's somewhat close by where you could also have marketing opportunities. Look into Southeast Asia K-League teams. Anyway, I'll move on because there were rumors at one point of Faisal Halim moving over to Korea. So that's the segue that we'll use here to talk about Selangor hosting Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors, as they're still known. That's not going anywhere, the Hyundai Motors part of it. I do love the Dinos kits that they've been wearing this year, though, the green and yellow. I did also see the 2025 kits for Jeonbuk. Go back to the neon green, you cowards. enough of this dark green nonsense. Go back to the neon green. You know you want to, but apparently I've just been waiting to rip on Jeonbuk for a long time. I do have good things to say about them in international competitions most of the time, but we'll start here instead with Selangor, who sits second in the table. Again, surprise, surprise, nobody else is going to take the top of the table in Malaysia. But the thing with Selangor is that they haven't lost in the Super League since July. Ronnie Fernandez is off to a hot start with them in his first season with the club, 8 goals in 11 appearances. They conceded late last time out to share the points, so that it's one of those ones where, as Keish always talks about, a lot of the other teams in Malaysia are struggling with consistency. Selangor struggle with consistency. Terengganu struggle with consistency. This is something that we've seen with the non-JDT teams. And speaking of Faisal Halim, I think this is a man that absolutely everybody in football, all the good folks in football, I think, are cheering for him right now as he comes back from an acid attack. If you don't know what happened there, he had acid thrown on him, 4th-degree burns, threatened his life. He is back from that now. He's playing again. He has to wear a mask. He has to wear sleeves to protect his skin as he's continuing to recover from this. And he's just had 25 minutes across 4 appearances. So I don't think he's going to have a big impact in this one. He might come on for the last 5 or 10 minutes, but Faisal, go out there, get a goal, man. It would be amazing. We're all cheering for you in this one. So he's definitely one to keep an eye on as they continue their ACL2 campaign. And they've gotten off to an okay start here, 4 points from 2 ACL2 matches. But the thing is, if you look at the results, fine. But if you look at the matches themselves, they've seemed stuck in second gear. The 1-1 at Muangthong was just, the first half was, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, awful. The first half of that game was just terrible. But they go out and they get a point going over to Thailand in another one that was kind of not an away game, but Muangthong were not at home in that one. So they were playing in Rajmangala, which is just a scant 80,000 person stadium, definitely filled up. It was great. I'd love to see them back at the Thunderdome, but we'll get back to that. But then Selangor, they had a 1-0 win at home against Cebu, which again, the result, fine. But the goal came kind of early in that one, and then they just kind of hung on. So for me, coming into this one, they haven't looked super impressive in ACL. And I think with this one, they might be in their heads a bit, because everybody that I've talked to here in Southeast Asia, and I say Southeast Asia because, like, when I was in Malaysia, this was the case. Now I'm here in Vietnam, this was the case. In Thailand, this was the case. Everybody's afraid of Jeonbuk on name. But as I know, as you know, this is not the Jeonbuk of ACL winning past. They are very realistically threatened with relegation this year. What, for the folks that don't know, the folks that haven't been paying attention, and again, to kind of peel that Band-Aid off, what is going on in Jeonju this year?
It's a mess. They currently sit second bottom of K-League 1, albeit 5 points above bottom, which is automatic relegation, but 3 points really behind absolute safety. I mean, Matthew Binns will tell you more about this in more detail, certainly, but just complete mismanagement from top to bottom. They have a manager in charge who they deem not good enough to take over full-time in 2023 when Kim Sang-shik left, and then they had to sort of find somebody to replace him. They had him in charge as a caretaker. Then they went for Dan Petrescu because obviously they had Park Ji-sung and Roberto Di Matteo there as some sort of advisor roles or something, and they tried to get someone that they knew, I think, and they brought in Dan Petrescu, who had a good CV. Obviously, in Cluj in Romania, he'd done well there, but just didn't work. And then when they were trying to find a replacement for Dan Petrescu, they had caretakers in charge who were out of their depth, and they even more or less admitted as such, albeit not as many words. And they were basically begging in the media. They were begging, please, can you find a manager to take over? Because it's just it was awful. And that spell of games where I think it was certainly a month, maybe even a bit longer, where they wasted that time to bring in Kim Do-hyun, and it took a long time for him to get going under Kim Do-hyun. So it's been just really poor in terms of like managerial appointments, and then how they've reacted to difficult difficult situation. It's been really poor. They've also made poor signings. There's been a generational shift at Jeonbuk with the sort of big players from their club's glory years getting old and having to move on. But they haven't scouted very well. It's been quite lazy, I think, when it comes to finding replacements. Some signings are just not up to. They're not Jeonbuk players. There's that. Not just about ability; it's about mentality. I don't think that they've really replaced them. So it's just mismanagement, and they've got themselves into a right mess. They've tried to buy themselves out of trouble. It looked like it was working for a while, but then since the Muangthong win, they've lost their last two in the league against relegation rivals. They lost against Daegu, including they shipped 2 late goals. They were winning that game. They came back from 2-0 down to lead 3-2, and they lost 4-3. And then they lost to Daejeon at the weekend. So it's been a disaster for them. It looked like they were going to get themselves out of trouble, and now they are firmly back in it again.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about Kim Min-hyuk earlier. Go get him back, because the defense for Jeonbuk it's just shocking. So I think this is one as well where if you're Selangor, get yourself up for this game, because this could be a famous result for Selangor, because again, this is not the Jeonbuk that I think we are used to seeing. But the thing for Jeonbuk in this is that they've also been able to handle themselves just fine in this tournament. They sent a B team to the Philippines and just absolutely handled Cebu. I mean, look, Cebu it's a relatively new club, and the Philippines league, it's got its issues. They're just in preseason, so I think expecting a lot out of any of the Filipino teams in this competition right now is a lot to ask. But Jeonbuk then were able to come back, and they did well against Muangthong, but it wasn't exactly their A squad here either. So I guess this is another one similar to Pohang. What kind of squad are you expecting Jeonbuk to field in this one as they make the trip over to Malaysia? Are they even going to be sending, because we've seen this with K-League teams in the past and J-League teams. I'm not just throwing the Korean teams under the bus with this, but we've seen them just send the youth squad, and like the star players don't even get on the plane. Is that kind of what you think is going to happen here? Because again, they have a very real relegation fight that they have to handle at home. So are they just going to send a B team here, do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll be very similar to the Cebu game. Thiago and Kwon Chang-hoon missed the game against Daejeon due to slight injuries. If this had been at home, this game, they might have played, but I don't think they will get sent over to play in this game, especially because of how bad things have got now in the league. These players are potential match winners, and survival is the absolute priority. The manager has said this. He's not hiding behind this fact. So I think it's definitely going to be a B team with a scattering of players who are slightly out of favor, like Kim Tae-hwan, Koo Ja-ryong, Jung Woo-jae, Lee Soo-bin, although he was on the bench against Daejeon at the weekend, and Park Jae-young came on. But it'll definitely be a second string. But they have got some talented young players. They have a B team, and their B team won K4. They are the K-League 4 champions. So they do have a good sort of youth system, and they have good players in there. And because also they have started ACL2 with 2 wins, there will be afforded a little bit of freedom. Although they're not really too bothered about the competition this year because of how serious it is in the league for them. But because they have had those 2 wins from 2, it's not a disaster if they go out there and get a draw or even lose the game, because they've got home games come up after that. So I think it will be a very, very young team with a scattering of the odd experienced player like Kim Tae-hwan and Koo Ja-ryong. But they did fine against Cebu. So, they'll be confident, I think, these B team players. And they won K4. So they should be fine. But they, even if they lost, it's just okay. That's fine. We'll have to worry about that when Selangor play Jeonbuk in early November in Jeonju.
Yeah. Well, and we'll get you out of here with this one, because again, I think this one, I'm really interested in this match, because I think if Selangor show up, they've got a chance here. Do you think in any of these 3 matches will we see an upset? And I mean, honestly, if JDT beat Gwangju, would that even be an upset? Like, from the K-League side of things, do you see any realistic chance that the Southeast Asian sides could get a result here?
Oh yeah, I think Buridam can certainly beat Pohang, especially at home. That is not that is not the kind of game that you want after two disappointing draws, an away trip to Buridam. Not just for the travel itself, but obviously the fact that they are a very, very, very strong team. Buridam the most likely, in my opinion, and then JDT in basically a neutral stadium. Oh, it's in Korea.
Yeah.
It's an away game for them, but it's also unfamiliar surroundings for Gwangju as well. There's no reason why they can't get a decent result against Gwangju.
Leaving Selangor out of it. I mean, I do think you bring up a good point about Jeonbuk. Their B team won the league, and I think that's also one where, like, again, I really, really like ACL too. I like the formatting of it. I like the teams that are in. I like the balance of play in this one. And the thing that I like about this from Jeonbuk's perspective is that maybe they're quote unquote too big of a club for this competition. Maybe we'll see how it goes as they continue. But I like the idea of their young players and some players that are struggling to get into the lineup to go and use this competition to prove themselves, as opposed to in the past. I think a lot of times we would just see a B team set and it's like, just go carry out the minutes, right? But I think with this one, it's not just about making up the minutes for them. Like, this match still does have meaning for them. And I think on the balance of play, I like this shift that we're seeing. Whereas I think 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, we weren't talking about the Southeast Asian sides really having a chance against K-League clubs. You know, JDT getting a surprise win against Ulsan at home was massive news. Whereas now, I think there's been a little bit of a shift, and I really like that going into this one. So obviously my heart still has a lot of love for the K-League sides, but I like this, the balance of play that we're seeing here now. And like I say, it probably wouldn't be surprising if Buriram get a result. JDT, I think they'll get a draw there, and I think they could sneak out a win. But then again, I don't want to go against Gwangju, because Gwangju has been proving me wrong this whole time. Like, 7 goals against Yokohama. Nobody saw that coming.
No.
So again, there are matches happening. I mean, there's football every day of the week these days now. So many competitions, which that's a conversation for another time, probably with some players about match load and everything else that's going on in football. But if you want to watch these ones, it is October 22nd. Gwangju hosts JDT. That same night, Buriram hosts Pohang. And then on the 23rd, Selangor host Jeonbuk. So tune in. The AFC official channels will have all the info of how you can watch that. And until then, that's it for this edition of the ASEAN Game. Do please remember to help spread the word about Asian football in general by heading over to wherever you get your podcasts and leaving us a 5-star review. And Paul, I can't have you on without talking about K-League United. Where can folks find you and the fine, fine folks running K-League United?
We are all at K-League United on all social media platforms, and of course, KLeagueUnited.com.
Not on TikTok yet. We got to get you guys up there doing those dances.
Next year, we'll do that next year for the 10th year anniversary.
X is dying, man. We got to get you onto TikTok. But anyway, definitely, obviously, go check out K-League United, and I will be back very soon talking with Giancarlo Galafuco after I edit that very long interview. Had a really great chat with him about everything from horror movies to becoming one of the leaders in the locker room for a KL City side that is on the rise, that's still doing really well. Fascinating conversation with him about his life in Malaysia and everything else. I'll get it edited. We'll get that up. But until then, from Hanoi, it's bye for now.